Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of SEO Fight Club. I'm just saying hello in the YouTube chat. So if you are watching on YouTube, we are looking there for questions. Let me pop the chat out. And we have a bit of a cool episode today. I'm going to do a very simple data-driven SEO audit. I spent about 20 minutes in two different tools pulling reports. Then I spent about 20 minutes, just looking at the reports and, figuring out what the data was trying to tell me. And then I'm going to use this hour to share what I found. So all told, less than 2 hours of work going into it. And normally when I do audits, whether they're small audits or they're big, heavy enterprise level audits, I tend to always deliver them in video format. The reason I do that is people have to watch the whole thing before they interrupt or object. They have to get the whole message, then they can respond. And sometimes I feel that's really important because if you start a debate on every bullet item, you can, often never get any change. Whereas once they see the whole picture and get the whole message, I just prefer it that way. And then typically when I do those video audits, if they have a bunch of questions, I have them collect and send all their questions. And then I create another video and send that back to them doing the question and answer. And that way they have it to reference. They can save it. They can show it to people who weren't there. They could watch it again to get more clarity. They can point to different time codes within the video for different departments. Things like that kind of make it cool. And so today I'm going to do a simple one and show you what goes into it. Little boilerplate. If you're jonesing for content while SEO this week is offline, be sure to check out Dre DeVera's show, the SEO video show. He interviews all the biggest personalities in SEO. Just go to YouTube, search for SEO video show. And Carolyn, what's new with the podcast?
Well, this week I was going to do like a Facebook question and answer. And so it turned out the episode is about what I found when I did that. And it's all about where do you go when you have questions?
That's a great topic. I always advise people that they need to join a group, because for more than a decade I worked alone in SEO, and when you can ask a group, it's like you're asking 500 experts, is this thing I'm about to do to my business a good idea? And that's a really good sounding board. Is it going to be along those lines or a different curve?
Well, it could be. I was thinking more like, how a lot of some of the questions one can answer by asking Google, interacting with Google.
And, more direct.
Yeah, just to kind of build up confidence, because I just see so many people just so scared to do anything. And so they keep asking questions, I think sometimes. And everybody's on a different part of their journey, right? So you can tell what a beginner question is and what an intermediate question is, and how reliant are they on a tool, by the question that they ask.
Yeah. And sometimes if you just go poke around Google, some of the answers are hidden in plain sight.
Yes.
Very cool. All right, so we have a big long list of IMG things. I'll just mention a couple of them. The Brand SERP Masterclass is a new course. So if you're looking for new instruction, check out that new course. I hear it's really good. We don't have the mastermind test review this week. We're wrapping up the enrollment period, so that one is untrue, so skip that one. And then next Tuesday, if you're in IMG and you want to do an Ask the Expert, nothing is off the table. If you want to ask me for all my best SEO secrets, that's the place to do it. So be sure to check out these events. All right, so to our topic. So the first thing I need to do is to disclose that the two tools I use are the tools I created. Now, before everyone groans and complains at me, every single one of you who does an SEO audit is going to use the tools you know best. It's exactly the same thing you'd do. Just happens that the tools I wrote, I happen to know better than any other tools. So that's why I used them. So I guess you'll just have to go along with that. So the first thing I do, oh, we have Clint here with us. The first thing I do when I do an audit of a page, a lot of people want to just jump in and audit the whole site. I try to start with like page types. So I'll look at a product page or a home page or a blog page or a category page, because usually the mistakes you find on page types will carry across all of the other examples of that page type. And so in this case, I'm doing an audit of a product page, and this is not an actual client. This is just an example I picked off the web. So if you hate me and you want to attack my clients, this is not my client. So with that, when I look at the page, I just kind of get a feel for the content. Like it's a very thin page. They're missing images in their upselling locations. They have a little bit of data down here. I'm not showing the source, but their product description equals their meta description. They have a very simplistic, minimalist navigation. Their product price point is very high. They don't have a lot of alternate images of the product. They went as far as to make a wish list, but they don't have their reviews and aggregate rating. They had gray conversion buttons, which, that's not good CRO. There's no FOMO on this page. They have their COVID safety policy. I'd make that an image, since COVID tends to trigger a lot of extra rules in search engines currently. So you can have a safety policy. I would just make it an image so we don't trigger any unusual behaviors. And then this real estate for the COVID-19 safety protocols, that's really prime real estate to say things like, free shipping for all US orders today only. Get that FOMO on getting the value of the free shipping. And if you're selling $1,200 products that'll typically go on a padded mailer or a small box, why would you not have a constant free shipping promotion? Just seems a little silly, because I would do constant free shipping promotions on $25 carts, And, especially when it's jewelry. And I made tons of profit on that. It was just a no-brainer. They say in stock, but you can do better than that because up here they're saying custom, and so they're implying that this is unique. So there's like one of these units, and if there's only one unit and it's unique, why not say nearly sold out? In stock makes it sound like you have 57 of them left in a pick bin. Now, what this product is, this is a tourmaline specimen. And so this is a naturally occurring gemstone in crystal format. And they sliced a cross section of the crystal like they were slicing, pieces of bread out of a loaf. And they took one of those cross sections and they turned it into a pendant. And so what we're looking at is that specimen gemstone. And it's really cool if you're into rocks and things of that nature. The specimen crystal jewelry is kind of, meeting of two different worlds. And so it's a very niche thing that people really like if they're into geology or gemology. So I think the product is really cool. And that's why it's so expensive, is it's, gemstone and gold, but it's a unique type. And there's definitely thin content issues here. Now, we have these errors over here, and I bet everybody saw. Yep.
Let me ask you just a quick question, because you made me think of a sort of a constant back and forth that I see in SEO groups. A lot of what you're talking about when you're evaluating this page is what we'd call marketing or CRO, which is very distinct from SEO. How much time do you spend on that in your audit in dealing with a client? Why do you feel that that's important? Because other people would sit there and say, well, that's not SEO, that's CRO, so I don't do that.
Well, here's the thing. If I do a whole bunch of SEO and get a whole bunch of traffic, but the business sees no more revenue, is that good ROI on the SEO? So you have to show results.
No, but it's a good opportunity to upsell CRO. I am an SEO expert. I optimize, in your case, I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I got over 4 million hits a month, and I sold X amount of products. So I am an SEO expert and a CRO expert. I sold you the SEO stuff. Now let me sell you my CRO experience and turn this into a real winner for you.
And you need to manage the expectation, because I can deliver the traffic, but if there's no CRO to help deliver the sales, that's going to be a very mad, unhappy client.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to, you don't necessarily have to do the CRO, but you have to manage the expectations around the CRO, especially if there are big CRO problems.
Yeah, that's why I say be clear on what you're selling. Most people make the mistake, or I'm going to give you more phone calls and more leads and more sales. But you don't control their leads. You don't control their forms. You don't control their where their forms are going. You don't control who answers the phone. You don't control who replies to the email. So you're totally out of control of those things, but you sold those things, and that's how you end up getting fired.
And in my opinion, if you find problems that are outside your domain, you just let them know that I found problems that are outside my domain. So there are CRO issues that are going to impact your ability to convert, but I don't fix those. I do the SEO, which generates traffic to the page, and that traffic is an input for CRO to get conversions.
Yeah,
So
So,
You
yeah,
know.
that's exactly how I handle it, especially if I don't know the niche that well yet. I'll definitely pass that on to the expert versus taking that responsibility myself.
But you can still call it out. You can say, while I was looking at SEO, I found these other issues. And so, like, along the lines, while I'm looking at the page, I often just open up the inspector and look at the console, and lo and behold, there's a ton of red. But the red isn't even the worst part. Sometimes the worst part is in the yellow that most people ignore. So down here, listen to this. Fallback to jQuery UI compatible activated. Your store is missing a dependency for a jQuery UI widget. Identifying and addressing the dependency will drastically improve the performance of your site. So that warning is probably the scariest thing in all these log messages. And so you can't even skip the yellow. You gotta read through these things. Some are more serious than others, and that missing dependency is probably quite serious. So why do I look at the page like this up front? It's because I want there to be a context in my mind when I'm looking at the data. The data will make more sense if I understand, what's going on this page and what they're trying to accomplish with it. I'm going to understand, the problems and the data a lot better, having just looked at it and just done this little assessment. And even though it's not all SEO, it all impacts the context of how I manage the relationship and what I'm going to look for in the data. So usually the next thing I like to do is try to find out the off-page story. Sometimes you'll find that you're dealing with a situation where the ranking sites have, a 250,000 more backlinks than you, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's good to know that up front before you get into the nitpicky details, because you might go to them and say, hey, on this particular keyword, there's, slim chance to compete without doing 3 years of link building. Would you want me to give you the recommendations anyway, or should I work on a different keyword that we'd be more likely to actually win on short order? And you just let them decide. In this case, however, the toughest competition has 7 backlinks and 1 referring domain. Most of them are goose eggs. When we look at the overall max, the referring domains, 20. And if you've watched my show for a long time, you know that I said there's this magic number of 25 referring domains on product pages. It still holds true. You could win the overall max with that advice. So the good news here is that we're not looking at a lot of off-page. It might be that as little as 5 backlinks to this product page could have a dramatic effect. So I think for link building, we're looking at a number, say, between 5 and 25 referring domains to the page. So not an infinite amount, not hundreds of thousands. That's very manageable. That tells me that I can compete here. All right. So now I'm using the volatility tool, and I ran a bunch of reports for the keyword, and I'm looking at the volatility of the page because I just want to get an idea for what's happening. How dialed in is page 1? Are there any opportunities? And so right off the bat, there's some motion, there's some experimental pages being tested. There's some time sharing above me. That's a great sign. And generally, the score of the website right above mine, the average rank, they're pretty close. So seeing how I'm top of page 2, you know, and there's like 3 weakish websites above mine, you know, maybe there's a decent odd that, you know, a little bit of SEO could get us to bottom of page 1. So, you know, I'm liking what I see here. We're seeing we're seeing position testing, you know, top or bottom half of page 1. So I'm feeling pretty good that with, you know, a decent amount of just normal SEO, we could probably take this page from top of page 2 to somewhere in the bottom half of page 1. I think that's very reasonable based on this data. Most of the up-down motion we're seeing is that Google experimentation that's popping in. So I like what I see on the volatility. It looks very reasonable. So again, what I'll often do is still look at those CRO comparables. One of the reports that Cora produces is the content report, which gives you a clever way of looking at all the content in the top 100 results. And it's really great if you want to find comparables. There were a number of watermelon tourmaline products, but there's only a handful that were actually very similar, where they were specimen crystals cut in cross section and turned into pendants. And so these are competing products. And this one, I went and got the product token off of their store because if you remember, ours was selling for $1,200. This one's selling for $700. All right. And I can already tell that there's a problem with the photography here, because one of the big differences between this photo and this photo is this photo for $700 is backlit on a light table. So there's a big box with white plastic and a bunch of light bulbs inside it, and they lay this down on that white plastic, and the light shines through the crystal. It's what these white parts are. All the white speckles throughout this is the light table shining through the crystal. And it makes everything more bright and vibrant, and you get a good idea of the colors. And when we look at these other pictures, like I'm not a big fan of the drab backgrounds. I think that's not a great idea. We can tell that this one is front lit, and probably the person holding the camera cast a shadow on the bottom half. You know, this one, you know, I suppose it's okay. The lighting's all right, but I don't like the marble countertop effect. It looks too gray. This one has a clearly fake shadow, and it's an unnatural position for the chain, and it's too small. This one has the same problems. Yeah, it's black in the center and kind of black in the center. So again, bad lighting. These ones had the same lighting problem. This one, the chain looks very unnatural for some reason, and the image is too grainy. So looking at this, you know, I think our main competitor is probably this one. And, you know, it's half the price. And so if we change the lighting on this, if we used a light table, you could probably see through the dark part better and see the richness of the green that's in the middle, get better translucence in the red. And why does it matter? Well, that vibrance, it does two things. You know, it makes it look more impressive for the specimen crystal that it is. And it may also impact the valuation of the product. So for a lot of gemstones, the color, the types of inclusions, especially specimen gemstones, the colors might affect the value tremendously. So the fact that it's such a deep green and such a vibrant red might take it into another price bracket than, the light green and pink. And so if those qualities impact the price, it might help you justify your price point as well, having the better lighting. And so this I faked. So this was the picture, and I used Photoshop to kind of emulate having a light table underneath it. But what they'd really want to do is just redo the photography. And again, this will affect the CRO, but if your SEO doesn't produce revenue, then how valuable is the SEO? So you're kind of on the hook for the work you're not doing. Also, in that content report, I pulled all the headings for this page. And so they have an H1, there's no H2s on the page. They have a bunch of inappropriate H3s, and then none of the smaller headings. So clearly all they have is an H1. This is kind of a big mess here.
From a SEO perspective, what would you name that? Because I don't know about you, but I've never even heard of watermelon tourmaline, and I probably wouldn't even. I go to the gym show in Quartzsite every once in a while, and they don't sell watermelon tourmaline.
They're probably there. If you knew to ask for it, they'd probably have it.
Mm-hmm.
So watermelon tourmaline is the type of tourmaline. It comes in different colors, and this is a specific variety that's green on the outside and red in the middle.
Right.
So I think the best name for it is watermelon tourmaline pendant. I think the thing they want to leave off is the word custom, and doesn't really even belong there. And I'd probably move the information about the setting in the chain to the end because it's kind of extra detail.
Yeah.
All right. This is another area where I tend to disagree with a lot of SEOs. So here we have the social sharing links, and these are all do follow. The reason I disagree with this for online retail is that none of these pages that we're linking to link back to the product page. They do reciprocate to the home page, but I don't want to spend authority of a product page to boost a home page. And I definitely don't want to boost these websites, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. They don't need link help from me. So I would make all these rel equals no follow, just because it's not a true reciprocal situation.
When I go one step further, you can cut off the link juice completely by using sponsored on this.
Yeah, and so that might come up as well. So maybe even both of those, double down on having those things not hurt your page. So next in the Cora report, most of your time, if you use Cora, should be spent in the roadmap. These are the measurement facts of how the page is different than its higher ranking competitors. So these aren't opinions. We actually measured these differences between this page and the pages that rank above it. And if we did all of this advice, because people are going to say, add 154 more entities, that's over optimization. If we did all of this advice, we would be tied for first place in all these factors. We wouldn't be tuned more than all the competition. We would merely be tied for first place in each factor. In Cora, you actually have to exceed the advice to take the lead. So the reason that's important is because, you know, people, they tell themselves a story that, oh, I can't use my search terms 69 more times on the page. It'll look too unnatural. That's a lot of exact match. That'll be over optimization. But if most of your competitors are doing that or in that ballpark, then why is it inappropriate for you to have competitive parity? If they can do it, why can't you? You know, and that's probably the most important question in SEO is if they can do it and they rank well, they rank better than you. And that's one of the key ways that their pages are different from your pages. Why can't you? And most SEOs will often be too timid because you know, an SEO blog told me that I shouldn't do that. You know, is that a reason to not rank because a blog told you you shouldn't do it? You know, so at some point you got to start looking at the data. You know, how is my page that doesn't rank as well as it could, how is it different than the pages that rank better? And that's all we're doing is we're saying if you can identify those differences between your page and the pages that rank better than your pages, somewhere in those differences is the reason why you rank where you do. And so by identifying those differences, we're figuring out how to compete. I'll break there because I know there's probably some opinions people want to add. What do you think, Lee?
Well, when I look at the data you have here, I mean, these are fairly light recommendations compared to some others I've seen where you have like add 457 more. It's a little bit surprising given how thin the content was on the page that this is all you have to do. But I think that, you know, if you just even directionally got, you know, a lot of this done, looking at the other data that you presented, you know, build, you know, half a dozen backlinks and do these tunings, I think that you could be at the top, you know, and challenging for those top 3 spots.
Yeah, and you know, one of the cool things about e-commerce is product pages are often way too thin. So if you compare this website's product page to Amazon's product page, they're night and day. Amazon will basically be skyscraper content. They'll have 3 linear feet of scrolling. It'll be 52,000 bytes of content, you know, and here we are with a 46 word page, you know, so yeah, you know, if Amazon can do it, if they can skyscraper a product page, we can do a little bit better. You know, it's very reasonable. And so with this roadmap, some of the things to understand is they're ordered by how strongly they correlate with rankings. So the strongest factors at the top, and they get incrementally weaker as you work your way down the list. I generally tell people not to work the factors in that order, find themes of things and address a theme all at once. So there's a lot in here around headings. So headings would be a good, you know, first place to start. And when you're in a mindset of tuning headings, it's just easy to knock them all out at once. The other thing people notice is that there's color coded. So there's font colors. And that's the shared data from Cora coming into play. So Cora, when you run a report, it'll anonymously share factor data back to the server. And then every time you run a report, that data gets shared back into the report. And so the font color is getting that shared data back into the report. So we know that the green ones are broadly applicable to just about all keywords. So they're strong correlations that are very broadly applicable. The black ones were only correlating for this report, so they might be niche dependent. And the red ones were broadly applicable, but not for this report. So the red ones, in a certain respect, are probably the biggest opportunity on the list, because these are the things that should be in the report, but aren't. They're the things that work everywhere, but your competitors forgot to tune for these well. So those red ones are probably the way you can get ahead easily with on-page. Now, I would consider all of them, because to be in this report, it had to be a statistically significant correlation, so a strong ranking factor according to the data, and you had to be short in it. So this roadmap, the reason why I want people who use Cora to spend 95% of their time in this roadmap, it really is the exact detail of how your website is different than the higher ranking competitors. It's a prioritized list. And just by kind of eyeballing it, I get these priorities that, we want to fix the title, the headings. Looks like we need to tune the navigation better. We got to work with our images. We want to tune the overall content more. And then, of course, factor diversity. And so, I'd probably address it, one or two of these themes at a time. Another thing I like to look at is keyword density. So we have some top ranking pages here, and our page, the Gem Lab, is coming in at 3%. But, it's like roughly 6, 6, 8, 11, 7, 7, 7, 7, 11. We're at 3. So we probably need to get fairly aggressive with keyword density tuning. At least I would. So here's some charts of the Cora data. So this factor is keywords and sentences. So we extract the sentences of the page and we count all those variant keywords that Google makes bold. And so here on the x-axis, we have page number in Google. So page 10 of Google, page 9, all the way to page 1. All right. And on the y-axis, we have the average factor measurement by page. So the average number of keywords and sentences by page number on Google. And so we can see as we go from page 10 towards page 1, that having more of this factor tends to improve your ranking. It appears to have some correlation. And so here's our measurement here on page 2. So we're below average for this factor on page 2, but we need to be above average for page 1. So this is where we're at, but up here is where we need to be. And so if I need to justify to them, the correlation, the trend I'm seeing, and why I want to get more keywords into sentences on the page, I think this is a really compelling story. We're down here below average for page 2, and we really want to be above average for page 1. That's a reasonable ask. Same thing, we look at entities and sentences, and we're well below average for page 2. We want to be above average for page 1. And so I like these charts because they can help you demonstrate why you're prioritizing these things. I'm showing you where we're at and where we need to be competitive. And I just need you to see the trend too and agree that we ought to try. And so these charts can be very compelling. And there's a lot of clever ways to use these charts, especially if you have like a plumber that has like 4 service areas. You might find that the competition on a given factor is off the hook in one of the service areas. And I constantly found that here in the Seattle area, because I'd be looking at Tacoma, Olympia, Seattle, and some other town, and Clint's there in Olympia skewing all the data. So I'd have to tell the plumber, well, I can get you these other service areas, but this Olympia one's going to cost you quite a bit because the degree of tuning you need to do is so much higher. And you can show that with the charts. You run 4 reports by each area, and you do a 4-up of the factor in question by each service area. And you show how 3 of them are no problem, but that one where Clint's working, good luck. And, that can help you set pricing. That can help you manage expectations, why you're doing great in those 3, but it kind of failed in that one. And it's all about managing that expectation. And, it's also all about setting the right price. So if you're going to be competing head to head with Clint, you probably want to charge a little more. What do you think about that, Clint?
Yeah, I do that too, but I use it to build templates. So let's say I know I want to rank in 10 cities. I'll combine it and then use the diff tools to figure out what my template should be. It kind of gives me a decent head start.
Yeah, that's a great methodology to use Cora trends to combine a bunch of reports. But I didn't do that in this audit. I'm trying to keep it a little bit simple, but there's even a whole nother level you can go to with the tool set. So we mentioned entities and sentences, and entities are nouns that Google's AI can understand contextually. Like they have an idea about those topics and what should be mentioned around those topics and how to statistically recognize those topics. And so the great thing is there are, APIs and databases that have all the entities that Google can understand, so we can look them up and measure them. And so here I pulled the entities off of the pages. And the way it generally works is you pick and choose the ones that make sense for your product page or your content, and you just pepper them throughout the content until you hit the right ratio. So it's not hard to use entities. They're just related keywords, and collections of entities form topics. So you want to make sure that the content around your target keyword helps tell the story of the topic that Google should be understanding. What do you think about that description, Lee?
I think it's a good description.
Okay.
In this report, the ones with the colors, those are the priorities, right? Everyone else, those are also found, but these ones are the priorities. Is that how that color code works?
Well, these ones, we definitely saw a significant correlation with rank position, but I wouldn't let it stop me. Watermelon clearly is important for a watermelon tourmaline, page. So I would still want watermelon on the page. Gold, if it's a gold setting, let's use gold. It is a gemstone, let's use gem. There's gemstone down there, So if the entity makes sense, I would still use it even if it wasn't in the strongest correlations.
And what if it was in the strongest correlations, but you know that it's not right?
I would probably skip it. Like if it's not wire wrapped, then I wouldn't use it. If it's not a 5mm stone, I'd skip it. If it's not white gold, I'd probably skip it. But you may pick up these terms. These other terms may also be artifacts because of your upsell. So if you have other tourmaline pendants and a carousel on the page, or other tourmaline earrings and a carousel on the page, you might pick up some of these other ones, and that might be perfectly natural. It might be natural that you have a page about a white gold watermelon tourmaline pendant, but one of the upselling tokens on the page mentions 925 sterling silver. It's okay. It happens in nature. That's why there's AI to say, oh yeah, no, that's within the tolerance for this topical cluster. So it's probably okay if you do. It's probably okay if you don't. But it's just easiest to work with if you pick the ones that just make the most sense for your content. You don't have to fight the business on those. And so we showed those charts about sentences. So there's another report that gives examples of sentences. And these come from all of the pages. And we sort them by the number of entities descending. So this sentence has 14 entities, and they're individually listed here. In general, though, most of the ones that are aggressively tuned were in the ballpark of 6 or 7 entities. They got as high as 14. So I would probably try to sculpt my on-page content to be in that 6 or 7 range. And it should be reasonable to get a list like this into a sentence. That seems like the standard you want to tune to. Same thing with questions, except nobody for this keyword is really doing a good job of questions. They're not talking about where the watermelon tourmaline was sourced. They're not talking about how to care for a specimen gemstone necklace. They're not talking about how to get free shipping on their next order if they leave a review. There are so many killer questions you could be doing on these pages, but nobody's doing it. And they're not tuned to a high degree of entities like the sentences were. So there's a real opportunity in this niche to get ahead with question and answers. What do you think about question and answer schema in the current climate, Clint?
I use it. It's one of the few on their own that help with rankings. So if you have the opportunity to put those in there, I would do that. Just be careful, because any day, as you know, Google can change your ideas, in particular about FAQ schema. And their guidelines say it's only supposed to be on the FAQs page and not the rest of them. They don't enforce that, but one day maybe they'll get a wild hair and try it.
Yeah, and the frequently asked questions for a product, they're going to change from product to product. So if you had to defend it to Google, it's probably easy to defend. They're product specific, so they're on the product page.
Yeah.
But I think you can do much better than the questions they're using. I wouldn't even pull from this list. I'd get a better list of questions.
I use those for like little mini blog posts or for link building. You want to go, like if you're into Cora, that question answer site, go in there and drop those with 2 different personas and that kind of stuff.
Yep. So another factor that they need to consider is alt attributes, because they're woefully short on images on the page. They only had 1 product image. They had a simple sidebar for upselling that had 3 product tokens, and 2 of them were missing their images. So they should have tons of upselling widgets. Here's other tourmaline jewelry. Here's other tourmaline necklaces. Here's tourmaline earrings. They could have a carousel for each related type of good they sell. And so, that alone, those upselling widgets, not only is a good user experience, but it adds a ton of images to the page. A lot of those images are keyword rich for the same keywords that this product needs. So, you ought to be doing it. And here we see keywords and alt attributes. So that's the tooltip text for images. We're way below average on page 2, and we need to be above average on page 1. 2 or 3 upselling carousels and a handful of alternate photos for this product can easily get us there. Easily. So there's no reason we shouldn't be above average for this, other than the fact we're doing a terrible job at ecom. Now, I wouldn't say that to the client, but I would strongly say we can solve this, and it's reasonable to solve this. So, yeah. And then schema, all this page had in terms of schema was very basic product schema. They didn't even have offer schema with the pricing and availability. They had no reviews to speak of. And so we can see from the Cora report the different types of schema that they're working with. That's another thing they were missing, was decent breadcrumbs. They had homepage and then product breadcrumb. They skipped all the category opportunity in their breadcrumb list. But they didn't have, the website. They didn't have the web page. They, it's kind of frustrating when they don't do the things that make the most sense for online retail. So they could have had their hours of operation for customer service. They could have had their aggregate rating. There's just a lot of opportunity. And a lot of those opportunities let you use your keywords more too.
Yeah, like that organization schema could have gone site-wide. They would have been all right with that. Breadcrumbs, you could handle that pretty easily with a plugin. But that's an easy schema to write. I kind of see why they wouldn't go crazy with product or, building that entirely out, or the offer, because just looking at what you're showing, it's probably programmatically created. So, and then based on the other stuff you're telling me, like you're saying, like the meta description is the product description and that kind of stuff, it would, that's probably how it's being done, which is okay until a product is popular and you want to bounce it into the SEO, and then you shut off that programmatic stuff and do some manual stuff and build that out better, like you were saying.
Yeah, and maybe not all caps.
Yeah.
Another thing I like to look at is the top words list. And I think Google said it best that SEO is all about not requiring search engines to read your mind. If I can't tell at a glance what you're tuning a page for, it's going to be really hard for Google. And generally, the easiest indicator is how prominently, how frequently are you using the top keywords. So watermelon, tourmaline, pendant ought to be what we're seeing. So here's our page. We have 3 of the variations, but they're in the middle of the list. Their next competitor up does a much better job. They have 6 variations and they got them clustered near the top. But the most important one on this list is this one, this 2-word watermelon tourmaline. That's the one I kind of want to see the most. And that combined one isn't even on this list. All right, but it's over here, it's over here, it's over here, it's over here. So all the prominent people, they're using the keyword watermelon tourmaline to a greater extent. And so if you kind of look at, what is being talked about the most, this is kind of, about custom, lab gems. And so, and you happen to mention watermelon and tourmaline. And we probably want to send a better signal than that. So, it's important. And this doesn't always graph so nicely. Sometimes a lot of this is handled in the backlink anchor text. And so it can be hard to see this pattern at times. But just looking at what's on page here, we kind of get an idea for this trend that it's about the amount of yellow and how well it clusters towards the top.
I like that quote because that's kind of what I teach when people are wondering if they should be doing handwritten schema. And the way that I write it, it is essentially makes it easier for Google, the bot, to understand what the page is about, because I'm leveraging the knowledge graph and I'm saying this page is about this stuff in the head. Automatically it gets there and it says, oh, this page is about this stuff. These are all those known entities that I know about. Okay, I got it. Now I formulated opinion. Let me go read the content and make sure it verifies, versus let me go read the content and kind of see if I can figure this all out on my own. So like, that's a great quote. I'm gonna go copy that myself.
Yeah, I'm very hard on Google about the things they say. This is one thing where I think it's spot on. SEO is largely about being very honest and transparent. So we had all that data, I kind of walked you through it, and then it just comes down to a plan. So I'll often try to segment it into 2 or more groups. Like you may have an executive team where things they need to consider, and an engineering team with their considerations, and a content team. And so you have to break it up by the business units of the client so that they can consume the work that needs to be done. And so in this case, I just kind of broke it into 2. So there's a content team working with product data and doing photos and managing inventory. And then there's probably a web developer and an SEO who you can bug. And so, more photos with better lighting. We need to fix those missing photos. We need to use our image alts, make them keyword rich. Definitely need to fix the headings. We need to tune the title and meta description better. We need to fix the keyword density in the top words. We need to make more keyword and entity rich content. It would really help a lot if we could, better utilize the traffic that SEO makes by having better FOMO on the page. And CRO tuning would go hand in hand with that to maximize the opportunity of doing the SEO. And then, I'd probably no follow all of the offsite links on product pages. Just let's leave the link juice on the product page. Definitely would make an argument for getting review stars. I know it's a Hail Mary in the current climate, but they'll be back. I'd still try to work it into the plan. Definitely need to tune their navigation. It was woefully short and not really keyword rich. And a whole lot more upselling widgets. I'd tell them to go nuts with it. Because the problem is when you don't use the upselling widgets, let's say it's a coffee mug website and it's a cute cat photo coffee mug, and they come into it and they see it and it's not quite what they're looking for. So if you don't have the upselling widgets there for, other popular coffee mugs or other cat mugs, or other cute animal mugs, if you could have a different carousel for each of those, those are all better options than the back to search button. And so you're competing with the back button when you don't have those upselling widgets. And those upselling widgets add tons of keyword rich content that's usually on point if you do it right. Fixing those JavaScript errors and the missing dependency. We're talking about 5 to 25 referring domains to this page and generally improving the factor diversity. All of this, very finite, very reasonable amount of work. All right. We're not asking for 250,000 backlinks. This isn't a 6-month contract. You know, this is doable, and you don't even have to do all of it. If you did 60% of this based on what we saw in the volatility tool, I think that might move you to page 1. And so it's a very simple data-driven plan where, you know, we can basically justify with hard data, hard measurement data, everything we're recommending here. And so this is kind of how I approach doing audits is, you know, I walk people through it, and then I come to a reasonable plan that I think can help them a lot. And there's a lot of things we could have gone into. I could have complained about their core web vital scores or their load time or their overall page weight. But I don't think any of those things are going to help them a lot. Like if it's a huge, egregious problem, all right, we need to do better than that. But if it's not a huge, egregious problem, those things are a distraction, and we should probably just take them out of the plan. What do you think, Clint? You do a lot of plans.
Yeah, I like this. I would say the 5 to 25 referring domains is probably the easiest thing to do, especially if you're using your tool set in particular. I mean, Cora creates an HTML page. Cora Lite creates an HTML page. The diff and the trends create HTML pages. And if I'm not mistaken, while depreciated, the outreach tool makes HTML pages. So and you can put each one of those individual things on 5 referring domains and knock it out every time you run one of these reports, and you've already covered that part. That's pretty easy to knock out.
Yeah, you could use the SEO information as the page content, the unique page content you need to fix the problem.
Yeah. And
those reports, those SEO reports, they're keyword rich as well, and all the right keywords.
They are. And then what I do is I just get an outline from like Phrase that's optimized at 100% according to what Phrase says, and throw that on there too, and it works. The other thing I would look at is see how they're selling. So if it's an e-com store, air quotes, that's sending people to Amazon or whatever, instead of no follow, I would use sponsored because of that last update where they're going after those particular types of affiliate sites, just to save yourself some drama.
Yep. And so, you know, overall, you know, I really like that online retailer, but I do think they need some guidance on how to sell online. I think they largely let their web developer call the shots, and they probably need to regain a little control and fix these issues and focus on how they sell and how they market more. So what do you think, Lee? What do you think of my 2-hour SEO audit?
I like it a lot. You know, it makes it very easy when I'm looking at you see a lot of, you know, consultants and, you know, come in and say, all right, here's the recommended plan and stuff like that. But you've backed it up, you know, with all the data that makes it very easy to see what, you know, where I am relative to the people that are ranking above me. And so, you know, I like that because it gives a very solid sense of where this is coming from. And I think that's missing in a lot of proposals.
And if you do this, if you do your audits as like an unlisted YouTube video, you can look at the stats. You can see, I gave this video to a room of 3 people. And I came back the next day and there were 23, full duration views.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can tell what the client is doing with the video, and that they went back and they probably had meetings after the meeting and they went back for clarification. So there's a lot you can do with it. And because, we could take all this information and make it a video, they have to go through all the justifications. Then we get to the recommendation plan, and they can't object about a bullet in the plan until they've heard out all the justifications. So you get a chance to make the full pitch of why they need to do this before they interrupt and say, well, that photo was taken by the owner and it's kind of a sacred cow, so I'm going to have to shut you down there. If you do this in person where they can interrupt and make those types of, shut down interruptions, it's going to derail you. But if you get them all to hear you out, you're going to be much more successful at getting them to do a lot of these changes, because then they have to argue with the justification.
Well, it also begs the question, which, sometimes you're forced to ask in one form or another, and sometimes to the owner, do you like the photograph or do you like additional $1,200 pendant sales?
Well, and honestly, let me click here. If you have $1,200 and you saw this one for $7 and this one for $1,200, and the content on this page is, kind of light and worrisome, and there's only one photo, but there's like 15 different photos from all angles of this one, and it's half the price. Which one would you buy? And this one has terrible lighting and this one looks vibrant.
I get where you're going with that. The only thing that throws me off on this one is that the Gem Lab one has additional gems on the pendant, and I don't know the value of those.
Yep. But in general,
yeah,
it probably won't get that far because there's only one image and no content. And if this page goes way out of their way, oh, this thing is awesome, here's our return policy if it's damaged in shipping, and here's how you care for it, and here's where they're mined and it's ethically sourced and fair trade, look at all this great information to make you feel good, and here's no content, bad lighting, twice the price. Of course that's gonna hurt you.
I think that one of the other things that from other sort of testing on product displays, and I'd be interested to get your perspective on this, the presence of the necklace. You made some comments on those about, like the pendant itself does not have a necklace there. It's hard to visualize me, or, my wife or whatever wearing that particular pendant without, the necklace there as well as part of the photo, even if it's just a piece like the vibrant pink one.
And that's part of the reason why you need multiple photos, because a lot of retailers will say, well, the chain is sold separately, or the price will vary based on selected chain. So you can pick a standard chain or a rope chain, or, but you typically have it. Oftentimes people want to know how the necklace is going to hang. And so this is very unnatural. You're saying it's going to hang in a very unnatural way.
Right.
Probably the best chain presentation here is this one. And this isn't bad, but it's cut off.
Right.
So I'd say that, this chain presentation and this one, those are the two best chain presentations. But question and answer section ought to tell you about the chain that comes with it. And, if it's not in the photos, and it should be, and if there are multiple chain options, you should have photos with each of the chain options so they can decide which chain option they should get. There's a whole lot of reasons why you need more photos in a question and answer section. And if this is 925 silver and this is gold, they might have different care instructions. So another reason for, question and answer section. And so, yeah, if you do your homework when you go to make the plan and present the plan, you'll not only have really good recommendations that can probably help them a lot, you'll be able to defend everything probably to a much better extent than they can argue against it. But you have to kind of do that homework to be prepared. All right, let's see. There's a question for Clint. Do you put those Cora HTML reports on a PBN?
Yeah, that's essentially what I do. I have domains specifically for those reports. So if anyone were to find them somehow, they would it would be just a whole bunch of data, a bunch of pages with data. And Cora Lite makes it easy to build them.
And so, yeah, there's no more questions that I see. So please remember to subscribe. And I hope you liked my audit. In a nutshell, that's how I do a quick one. And I'd be very open to having Lee or Clint do an episode on how they do an audit, because it's very cool to see how people do it, because everybody does it differently. So let us know if you want Clint to do an audit demo at some point, and we'll twist his arm. We got a hell yeah in chat on that one. So I might pressure you. Oh, there's an oh yeah on having Clint do a demo audit. So Clint, give it some thought. People want to see what you do. Think he hung up and ran away. All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot for hanging out, and I will